Hello, today we're going to have a look at how to build a chorus effect from scratch using nothing but Sawtooth Waves and a few very simple processing techniques. First of all, fundamentally, what is a chorus effect? It's two waves moving very slightly against each other, but there are very specific rules about what those two waves have to look like and how they have to move against each other. That's what we're going to do today. I'm going to start with a simple sawtooth wave. You've heard it 1,000 times, every synth has one. This is pretty much as simple as it gets. Lots and lots of lovely harmonics to play with. That's why we use sawtooth waves. They're really rich in harmonics. Chorus effects are all about waves being in phase, so it's really important that we lock the phase of this sound. I'm going to set it into fixed phase mode, which means every single time I hit a key on the keyboard, it's going to start drawing the wave from the same point. You can't really hear phase with a pressed key, but trust me, mathematically that's doing exactly the same thing every time I press the key. The next thing that I'm going to do is copy this, paste it, and now we've got two copies of exactly the same thing. Without me doing anything else, let's have a listen to what just happened. Now, the observant amongst you may have noticed that just got louder. In fact, it got louder by 6 dB. There's a little bit of velocity sensitivity on the keys. So here we're at -27. If I mute either of those sounds, should be around about -33. There you go. 6 decibels equates to a doubling of volume. So when we add these two waves together, because they're both in fixed phase, in other words, they're drawing exactly the same wave at exactly the same time, every aspect of the wave generates constructive interference. The wave gets twice as big and therefore twice as loud. Now then, obviously that doesn't sound anything like a chorus. That's only step one. We have two waves, first fundamental requirement to build our own chorus. The next thing we have to do is offset them slightly. And in chorus effects, you're typically working around the 20 to 50 millisecond range of the offset between these two waves. We're going to deal with a lot of these kind of woolly statements like typically and there or thereabouts, but that really is the sweet spot of chorus effects. When you're turning your knobs on your chorus unit, what you're doing is varying these very, very small, very, very subtle amounts. So what I'm going to do is, on the copied synth, on the copied oscillator, I'm going to set a delay for the key on of, let's say, 35 milliseconds. Somewhere between that 25 to 50 thing that I was talking about. What's that? What effect's that going to have on the sound? Remember, we doubled the sound when we identically replicated the waves, but we're no longer identically replicating the waves because one of them has just been offset. Watch this for magic. That is a comb filter. And if I go up the keyboard somewhere, there, look at that. You always get some really nice examples of comb filtering if you step up through the octaves. So I just happened to find it on F. What's happening there is that because these two waves have been offset, they are still playing at exactly the same frequency. So everything that's happening with the interaction between those two waves is happening consistently and identically for every period of the wave. And in some occasions, wave A happens to be going up when wave B happens to be going down, and you'll get cancellation. Sometimes both waves are going up at the same time, and then you'll get constructive interference. And the different relationships between all of these different, if you think of them in terms of like control voltages from a modular synthesis kind of world, you're either adding these two voltages, amplitudes together, or you're cancelling each other out. And when you plot that stuff on a graph with these very, very subtle differences between two waves with plenty of complex harmonics to play with, you end up drawing the picture of a comb. That's why it's called a comb filter. What we have to do then is to get some kind of movement in the sound, because chorus is all about that sort of wishy-washy sort of thing going on. So how do we generate that movement? Well, the movement's caused by the pitch of the copied wave, wave number 2, being modulated over time. In other words, it's not a static effect. We're going to make the pitch go up and then we're going to make the pitch go down constantly on a cyclic basis. Perfect vehicle for doing something like that is a low frequency oscillator. So over we go to our LFO. We've got the copied wave selected here. And I'm going to set the LFO to about half a second. We'll start off at half a second. Then in my modulation matrix, I'm going to make the LFO modulate the oscillator's pitch. So LFO 1 attached to pitch. And then this little slider down here is the modulation depth. Now if I get too carried away with this and turn it up too much, listen to what we're going to get. So you can hear that really noticeable pitch increase and decrease as the second wave's modulation is going like a very slow vibrato. In fact, if I sped that wave up, it would sound like a vibrato. Now, that's not what we're interested in with chorus. We want really, really tiny effects. So I'm going to crank this right down to, say, 0.3. See what that sounds like. Pretty good. Now, Hallian has a fine-tune control. This graph here basically acts like a fine-tune control. This isn't a Hallian tutorial. I don't want you to get too obsessed with the interface. But basically, the shallower the curve that I make on this thing, I'm having more minute modulation effects on this number here. And suddenly, got a chorus effect. It's not beautiful. I'm working with pure Sawtooth Waves here, and I'm not really applying any voodoo to the processing of the sound. This is as simple as it gets, but we have a working chorus here. That's not bad. Now then, the chorus effect has a couple of really stock controls that you're going to see on pretty much every unit you ever come across. And the first is modulation. Now, modulation or modulation depth, very often, you'll also see it labeled intensity. They're all the same thing. What they're all talking about is how much modulation, how much change you're applying to the pitch of the second oscillator, the change in pitch of the second oscillator. In other words, how much bigger or smaller are you making this number? So when you turn your modulation depth knob, what you're basically doing is this. You can see it's quite difficult for me to actually do very much with this, so I tend to go into fine mode. You can't see the numbers changing, but you hear it more effectively. So that's modulation depth, changing the amount of the pitch control of the second wave. And we also have rate. Rate is the speed of the LFO. So here we're at 0.53 Hertz. In other words, the LFO is doing its thing once every 2 seconds. Let's see what happens when we change the frequency of the LFO. Just going to increase the depth a little bit. That's quite a classic kind of chorusy sound. The fast cycling thing. So those are the two most common effects you're going to come across on choruses, modulation and rate. Now then, let's talk about the final step in our kind of chorus journey, is to turn it into a stereo chorus effect. And this is really pretty magnificent. The way stereo chorus is generated is by copying everything that we've done until now, both waves, both oscillators. And we're going to make a copy of that. So now we've got 4 oscillators. And in the copy, for the second wave, the modulating wave, I'm going to invert its phase. I can do that from this control here, set it from 0 to 180. Basically means I've flipped that second wave. It's still drawing otherwise identically to the first version, it's just doing it backwards. And what this means is that we're talking about these interactions between 2 waves. Sometimes both of them are pointing in the same direction, you get constructive. Sometimes they're arguing with each other and you get cancellation, destructive interference. Whatever's happening on wave pair number 1, the opposite is happening on wave pair number 2. And that produces a magnificent effect. The way we really want to hear stereo chorus though is by panning the first version, the unflipped phase version. We're going to flip that, pan that hard left. The second copy, we're going to pan hard right. And now we've built a stereo chorus. This is your absolutely stock 4x2 Lego brick. Listening to that in headphones, you can hear the 2 waves interaction with each other. It's just utterly gorgeous. And that's how to build a stereo chorus effect. That's some ninja physics going on there, isn't it brilliant? Thanks very much for watching. See you next time.